to be with you today. So a warm welcome to everyone joining us on this important and also I would say very timely discussion on the development dimension of the COVID-19 vaccination. And this is the latest installment in UNDP's Open Dialogue series, as we have called them, which we launched in 2020 together with our overall COVID-19 response. And we did that to increase partners' awareness on how UNDP as an agency is responding to the development needs of communities in the countries that we serve to help to address the impact of the pandemic. And we are, of course, doing so in very close coordination, and you will see this also in the call today with colleagues across the UN system and beyond. And this is the 8th dialogue that we hold as part of this development dialogue series. We encourage all of you participants to share your comments or to ask questions using the chat box function in the Zoom. And in addition to Zoom participants, we also have other members of the public and external partners joining us via UNDP's YouTube channel. So our team will also be moderating and addressing questions on both Zoom and YouTube as they come. And we can also cover some of them during the Q&A session that we have at the end today. Today's discussion should be an interesting one, I believe. Unprecedented collaboration in science has, as we know, delivered multiple safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines in record time. We certainly feel this here in the US. As of 27th of May, more than 1.78 billion vaccine doses have been administered worldwide, equal to 23 doses to every 100 people. And this is, of course, a tremendous achievement. But as we are also painfully aware of, on the other hand, vaccination across countries is incredibly uneven and inequitable due to the vaccine nationalism and challenges in manufacturing, supplies, logistics systems, and resources. And hear me now, you've heard these figures before, but I think it's just astonishing. Only 0.3% of those 1.78 billion does have been administered in the low-income countries, only 0.3% of the 1.78 billion, according then to the World Health Organization. In high-income countries, we know that 1 out of 4 adults is vaccinated approximately, as compared to less than 1 in 500 adults in the low and middle-income countries. And these are figures from late April this year, so of course changed somewhat. But the inequality that we see and the risk for people, communities, but also for us as an international community is very clear, I think, to many of us on this call. And it's also clear to us in UNDP, having accompanied this through our socio-economic response in the UN, that the vaccine equity will prolong the pandemic. It will cost lives and it will deepen the negative development consequences of the pandemic. And this, of course, means that the world can only recover from the crisis if there is a fairer but also faster access to vaccines for everyone across and also within countries. The issue of the COVID-19 vaccination is therefore central to sustainable recovery that puts firmly the global goals as our roadmap, our compass, and something also, of course, that we have collectively agreed upon. We need to invest in a way that takes us beyond recovery towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So against this backdrop, we are holding this very important and also timely discussion, we believe, to shed the light on what we can do, what we have already done and collectively to advance also equity, resilience and sustainability in the COVID-19 vaccination. Today, I'm happy to be joined here by my dear colleague, Haoliang Xu, who is ASG and the Director of the Bureau for Policy and Program Support with UNDP, and he will provide us with a brief update on UNDP's COVID-19 response, contextualizing our approach to address the development dimensions of the COVID-19 vaccination, as I mentioned. And it's also my great pleasure to welcome another friend and colleague, Dr. Peter Singer, who is the Assistant Director General and Special Advisor to the Director General of the World Health Organization. Who joins us here today also to share the UN's response for vaccine access and equity at the global level on behalf of WHO. I'm also very pleased to have another dear colleague with me here today, Mandeep Diwal, who's the head of UNDP's HIV Health and Development Group at the Bureau for Policy and Program Support. And Mandeep will also unveil UNDP's COVID-19 vaccination response. And then we have the opportunity to hear perspectives from what we sometimes call the field, the countries, the people that we are there to serve, from colleagues joining from Serbia, from Indonesia, and the Republic of Congo. So we have with us Dr. Verica Javonovic, Director of the Institute of Public Health of Serbia, who will present the Serbian and partner perspective on green vaccine delivery. We have Sophie Kemkadze, who is the Deputy Resident Representative of UNDP in the Republic of Indonesia, who will speak to her experience on the issue on digital solutions and vaccine delivery. And then last but not least, our colleague Malay Diop, who is the Resident Representative of UNDP to the Republic of Congo, who will share perspectives on the role and importance of strong systems in the context of vaccine delivery and more. So let's move on, and let me now hand over to you, Hao-Liang, to give us also some framing with regard to UNDP's role in all of this. Over to you, Hao-Liang.
Thank you very much, Ulrika, Dr. Singer, and colleagues and the friends. Let me very quickly just make a few points, to put what the UNDP is doing in relation to vaccine in context. As we all know, the Secretary General has said that we have a triple crisis of climate, biodiversity, and pollution, but at the same time really compounded by this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, and also compounded by the inequality that we have seen, unprecedented inequality that we've seen across the world. And this is a context in which we're dealing with this issue of vaccine. And we know that if we don't do something serious and urgent, and many vulnerable population and many countries in a position of vulnerability will not have the kind of vaccination rate coverage we need by 2024, 2025. So that is one big challenge we have, the inequality that we see. And at the same time, we know that for this unprecedented challenge, we need a multilateralism. Right? For this multidimensional complex crisis, only multilateralism can help solve this problem. And the UN has this comprehensive response to COVID-19 from health perspective, development, as well as humanitarian perspectives. And as colleagues know, UNDP is supporting the UN in its technical lead role, for its socio-economic response. And when it comes to vaccine, and I think our objective is to drive, equality, right? To support the development aspects of that, and also clearly under the framework of national vaccination deployment plans, under the leadership of the RCs, WHO, and the UNICEF. That's what we're trying to do. And specifically, as I said, we try to address the development dimensions of COVID-19 vaccination by looking at digital solutions, right, to its delivery systems, by looking at the data to strengthen the decision making for more equality, more equity in the vaccination process, and then also working on greening the COVID-19 vaccination. And at Mandeep, we'll talk in more detail about it, so I won't get into details. Just to conclude, and we work very closely with WHO and Dr. Tedros' leadership, and we are playing our part, to address this, development aspects of COVID-19 response, a global effort. And so we look forward to have listening more, to our colleagues in the field as well after, Mandeep and Dr. Singh. So over to you, Ulrika.
Yes, and I'm handing straight over to Mandeep. No, sorry, to Dr. Peter Singer. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Ulrika, and it's wonderful to be here with you all. Thank you, Ulrika, for your brilliant introduction. Thank you, Hao-Liang, and of course, it's wonderful to be here with my very dear friend Mandeep and her colleagues. Look, my message is very simple, which is that the multilateral system is working hand in glove together to address this defining challenge of our time, COVID, worst crisis in 100 years. And vaccine equity, which is probably the defining challenge at the moment. And in particular, WHO is delighted to be working so closely with UNDP and with such wonderful colleagues in partnership, because we all have to work together to support countries to recover to the SDGs, to deal with the current challenge, and to support countries for an equitable and resilient recovery, because we're way off track now as a result of COVID. Just to pick up from where Ulrika left off, the lessons of the pandemic are three: equity, equity, and equity. And one of the foremost equity challenges is vaccine equity. And I was just checking the figures today, and I won't repeat the very correct framing that Ulrika used. Another framing, and this is from pandem-ic.com from our colleagues at the World Bank, is in high income countries, there's about 60% population coverage, first dose. Upper middle income countries, 30%, lower middle income countries, 10%, low income countries, less than 1%. So it's just a total gradient, and that's a snapshot of vaccine inequity. Why is that a problem? Ulrika mentioned many of these things. It's a problem for epidemiologic reasons, because that's a great way to generate variants. If this fire is burning anywhere, it will cast off embers everywhere. It's obviously a huge ethical challenge, because human life has equal dignity and worth, every human life. It's an economic challenge, because the world economy is on its knees and we can't restart until we deal with the COVID everywhere. And I actually think it's an issue in peace and security too, and we've seen the geopolitical tensions. So that's why vaccine inequity is such a problem. We have to ask ourselves, well, what is the source of the scarcity? And I think about it in terms of the 3 Ds: dollars, doses, and domestic production. So dollars can be short, and certainly the ACT Accelerator is short about $18 billion this year, which is a very, very small amount compared to the tens of trillions in economic damage. Doses can be short, and that's what's needed in the immediate term, dose sharing. And it's fantastic to see many countries now having stepped forward to share vaccine doses and have them redistributed equitably through COVAX. But at the end of the day, what's really short is the domestic production, and that's the way to sustainable equity and vaccine sovereignty, at least at the regional level, whether it involves know-how, technology transfer, intellectual property, et cetera. And I'm sure we'll get into that in the discussion. There are plans to redress vaccine inequity. For example, just today, there's a Washington Post editorial from the heads of WHO, IMF, World Bank, WTO, on a plan that will get us to 40% vaccination by the end of this year and 60% within the first half of next year. It has a $50 billion price tag, but $9 trillion in projected economic outputs, which is a 180-fold return on investment. And we have to work right across the multilateral system with UNDP, with UNICEF, with all our partners to achieve such a result. The issue then will be the recovery. It has to be equitable. It has to be resilient in the form of future pandemic preparedness, and it has to be green, which is the point Mandeep, I think, will now talk about. And in closing, all I would say is just to emphasize 2 things. One is I want to re-emphasize this issue of partnership and how important it is for WHO to work so closely with UNDP, which is why I'm so thrilled to be here today. And of course, with all our multilateral partners in the SDG 3 Global Action Plan, but also the courage that's needed for us to solve this problem. There are challenges here, like in intellectual property, for example, and other challenges. And what I want to put forward is the idea that this is the world's Mandela moment. It always seems impossible until it's done. And so we have to get this done. We have to end this pandemic, and we have to do it together. And it's wonderful to be here with such brilliant colleagues from UNDP. And thank you so much, Ulrika and Mandeep, for inviting me. And WHO is proud to work closely with you. And of course, you have our full support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter, for being with us and for those kind words, but also, I mean, for really laying out, I mean, of course, your leadership in the vaccine response, but also how we together see the entire picture of what needs to be done and how we need to do it together. And yes, let's look upon this as the Mandela moment, and that we actually can do it if we come together and also lead, but also give the practical support that we need to give to countries and communities. Mandeep, I'm handing over to you, and then let's see if we have a couple of minutes also to have some reflections between the two of you leading on this in different ways.
Thank you very much, Ulrika. Excellencies, distinguished panelists and guests, it's always an honor to speak on a panel with Dr. Singer. I really just want to summarize a little bit of the context which Hao-Liang, Ulrika, and Dr. Singer have laid out. About rampant vaccine inequity, reversing progress on common goals, like the Sustainable Development Goals, the pledge to leave no one behind. Just recently, the UN Secretary General has noted that the richest countries and regions are getting vaccinated more than 30 times faster than those with lowest incomes. The vaccination gap is not just unfair, it is deadly, and it is a threat to everyone. The emergence of new waves driven by the spread of variants of concern is already demonstrating that COVID-19 vaccine inequity will prolong the pandemic, cost lives, and delay equitable and sustainable recovery. Speed matters in our response, as does scale. The crisis of vaccine inequity is a global problem that requires an urgent global response, one with raised ambition, like we heard about from Peter today, that's presented in the Washington Post editorial. We need all hands on deck to drive fairer and faster access to vaccines for everyone, everywhere. UNDP's support to vaccine equity is part of our COVID-19 response. It builds on our role as the technical lead of the UN Socio-Economic Response framework and is in support of national vaccine deployment plans under the leadership of government, the resident coordinator, WHO, UNICEF, and UN country teams. As with our COVID response, our support to vaccine equity is a collaborative country-facing endeavor guided by WHO. Collaboration and partnership are hardwired into all that we do, including with international financial institutions and the signatories of the SDG 3 Global Action Plan on Healthy Lives and Well-Being, which is led by WHO. Peter mentioned this as well. The SDG 3 Global Action Plan brings together 13 multilaterals working on health to drive greater collaboration and scale for impact. Vaccine equity requires urgent investments in systems and governance. And as with our COVID-19 response, UNDP's support on vaccine equity aims to strengthen systems and governance for greater equity, resilience, and sustainability. We're pleased to be working closely with our partners to support countries in 3 critical action areas, all in the context of national vaccine deployment plans and all critical for building forward better. The first action area is digital solutions for vaccine delivery and system strengthening. We know that closing the digital divide and harnessing the power of digital technologies for COVID vaccination is essential for achieving universal health coverage and driving faster and fairer vaccine rollout. In line with the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation and the WHO digital health strategy, we're supporting countries to implement digital solutions for vaccine delivery and health system strengthening as part of country-led efforts to scale the use of digital tools to address health and development challenges. The second action area is data for vaccine equity. We know that granular, multidimensional, and real-time data can support better decision-making for vaccine equity. UNDP is working with WHO, UNICEF, and other partners to support countries on using hyperlocal and multidimensional vaccine analytics to inform and drive equity in the implementation of national deployment vaccination plans. The third action area is greening COVID vaccination. We know that COVID responses generally have dramatically increased health waste. COVID vaccination is also increasing health waste. COVID vaccine rollout must address the health of people and planet, which are bound tightly together. In partnership with WHO, UNICEF, the UN Environment Programme, Healthcare Without Harm, Engineers Without Borders, among others, UNDP is supporting countries to develop integrated solutions for health and environment to more effectively, sustainably manage COVID healthcare waste, including for vaccination. Reliable access to renewable energy is also a critical enabler of health equity. UNDP is working with its COVID-19 private sector facility and partners to link smart facilities and solar for health solutions with COVID-19 vaccination efforts. We're already working in 50 countries with our partners on various aspects of these 3 action areas that I've described, but we're pleased to be working with our partners now to do more to support greater vaccine equity, which, as Peter has said, is really the challenge of our time. I'll stop here now, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some of the country perspectives. Thank you very much. Look forward to any questions and comments.
Thank you, Mandeep. And let's accompany also the chat box and see what kind of questions we have. But before I go, because I'm also really curious to listen to our colleagues in what we call, as I said, sometimes the field, but colleagues working out there. But before I hand over to them, I would like to hear also, I mean, Peter, the WHO then leading on all of this and looking at this also from the kind of comprehensive perspective, would you say that the UN with partners, as Mandeep described, has come together in the way that you would expect us to do, and what can you see where there is still room for improvement?
Thank you, Ulrika. I do think that it has in a few different groupings. So for example, there was the initial crisis response team, and that came together very well for the immediate response. There was the Accelerator, which has formed. There's CTAP, and those 2 things are getting more and more closely related as we see the manufacturing task force, and that gets to the distribution, not just of fish, but of fishing, if you will, to go back to that parable in domestic production. There's the SDG 3 Global Action Plan focused on the transition to an equitable and resilient recovery. And of course, the socioeconomic framework that Mandeep mentioned. So there's at least 5 groupings closely aligned that are representing inside and outside UN multilateral agencies working closely together. And here's the key part, in support of countries. And just to take one concrete example, and I'll be very brief, I just want to particularly call out the point Mandeep made on the hyperlocal within country data. You know, we talked a lot about vaccine equity and the differences between vaccination rates across countries, but we all know that those inequities are very deeply felt within countries as well. And so to be able to take an X-ray of that and look at the geographical location, for example, of the lower rates, broader inequities, and using vaccination as the entry point for a broader look at intra-country data-led hyperlocal equity analysis is so critically important for health and well-being. And this is an area where UNDP, Mandeep and her colleagues are providing brilliant leadership. And so, you know, leadership has a lot to do with followership as well, and recognizing these nuggets of beautiful work. And that's how we have to work together, because at the end of the day, it's about supporting countries and even more so the health of citizens. And we can only do that together. So thank you, Ulrika, for that question. And
thank you so much, Peter. Yes, and thank you for reminding us that we are talking about increasing inequality within and between countries. Now we are turning to Serbia and to you, Dr. Verica Jovanovic, who is the director of the Public Institute of Health, as I introduced in the beginning of the session. And we're going to hear how Serbian and partner have worked on the green vaccine delivery. So please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ulrika Moder. It is really a great honor to approach all of you today, and thank you for this opportunity. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues and partners, it is not easy moment actually to provide a summary of all activities that have been supported by the UNDP during this pandemic. but I found it a very important opportunity to share the experience and challenges, and of course some results of the success, particularly related to the immunization process against the COVID-19. And thank you for that. First of all, I would like, to say that I'm glad that I can speak in name of the Republic of Serbia, being an acting director of the Institute of Public Health of the Republic of Serbia, and also somebody that who takes participation in the crisis management body that is organized within our country. I must say that the main activities that have been supported by UNDP in Serbia go together with the main 4 pillars related to the activities that are already mentioned previously by my colleagues. So in our country, the first orientation that was fulfilled by the UNDP was that UNDP supported the government for the actually registration and digital evidence about the immunization. So I would like, to mention that kind of e-platform for the implementation of vaccines against the COVID have been very, very important. It is of the utmost importance for the speed, for the way how the immunization actually has been implemented. Also, I would like to say that I'm really very much proud, and I think that I have to share that with you, that Serbia have been actually implemented an excellent job from the point of view of the public perspectives, because public health perspectives, because the government of the Republic of Serbia actually positioned the issue of health as a leading issue related to this pandemic, particularly by using the instrument of immunization as a very important instrument to cope with this very, very heavy process. So these digital solutions help somewhat. First of all, for the free registration of our users, how the citizens of Serbia can approach the government and make the registration. The other thing I would like to say that with all these instruments and with free and open opportunity to register, which is now ongoing, we achieved the immunization up to 50% of the adult population in the Republic of Serbia, and majority of our municipalities are approaching that objective. So at the moment, we do have in the capital of the city a little bit more than 50% of the adult population immunized. When we do this kind of analysis according to the age group, we can even go more for particularly age from 65 to 75, which we can find in some municipalities even 80%. So the second thing, which I think is very important according to the achievement of SDGs, is medical waste management issue. That is also very important, and UNDP recognized that kind of the task as very important. And then some activities like situation analysis, development of healthcare waste management plan, then development of some instructions how to do that, and the evidence about the generation of that kind of hazardous, actually infectious waste from the immunization was a topic. I think, that is very important issue because of the health of the public and of the environment, and unique approach is of utmost importance. Also, I think that the support to the government related to some data collection by UNDP was important for the right decisions. And last but not at least, I would like, also to mention which was very important for all countries on the globe at the total level, was actually to have a media approach. UNDP supported us to have like a media instrument here in institute as well at the country level, with different type of materials that could be used like TV and radio jingles, but also for the approaching people through these Zoom opportunities that have been the most successful way of communication among important professionals. I think, we as a country, with the UNDP support, we came with some slogan, bring back the hug, and we hope that we all together, with the support of UNDP at the global level, with cooperation with the WHO and other UN agencies, could, of course, be successful, and together we can come to the end of this not easy situation. I forgot also to say that particular support UNDP had by the UK government, and also related to this e-platform and related to the waste management, what I also didn't mention. USAID was also, a partner. UNHCR with related to the migrants also was included. We have a very good cooperation, and I think, that is one of the very important issue, to have equity, as a colleague mentioned, at all levels, and to be very fast and to implement all vaccines and all instruments to cope with pandemic. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jovanovic, and thank you also for describing, how we have worked together and how you've been able to make good use of the support in many aspects. What is the greatest challenge that you're facing now in Serbia in the situation, and what can you see come up in the future that concerns you?
Actually, there are many challenges. We can discuss all. It is not particularly related to our situation, but I think we can maybe even today come with main concerns for the global level, worldwide. I think new variants in the world could be some challenge. Actually, now I must say we have been organized ourselves in a way to know what we have to, for example, control. Actually, now this virus is more, it is not that we can recognize the risk. We know, for example, that the control of this situation, pandemic, could be merge of many successful strategies. The first one is immunization, and we are really lucky, and we are working hardly on that we cover more and more people and all age groups according to the international recommendations, and that's why it is important for us. And of course, to implement all of those measures with preventative measures, we still let's say, motivate people to have a distance, to do that kind of control of possible spread of the viruses. I think that the biggest challenge could be actually to stay with this kind of variants of viruses, and to stay with this better situation related to the pandemic. That is our challenge, and in the same time, it is our task. And that is.
Thank you so much. And as you say, it's a challenge for the international community as a whole, at the same time as, of course, you need to look at it in each and every country. Thank you so much again, Doctor. And let's see if you have time to accompany us as we move to the Republic of Indonesia. And I'm happy to introduce Sophie Kemkadze, who's our Deputy Resident Representative. Sophie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ulrika, and good evening from Indonesia, and warm greetings to everyone joining today's webinar. Before I begin, I'd like you to visualize for a moment the task of vaccinating communities across the world's fourth most populous country, comprising over 17,000 islands, some of which are only accessible by small boats. In Indonesia, many vaccinators often need to carry portable cold storage units by foot or by boat in areas with limited infrastructure. Now, add to this the unique challenge of a nationwide COVID-19 vaccination campaign and you get a clear idea about the monumental task for vaccinators across the archipelago. Despite these challenges, however, the government of Indonesia has successfully administered around 36 million vaccine sessions annually through its routine immunization program. Since 2018, UNDP has supported the government with a digital and innovative vaccine distribution system, which is called SMILE, and which is a beautiful abbreviation of its Indonesian name. When the COVID crisis hit and the vaccines were on their way, the government of Indonesia requested UNDP to support its ambitious COVID-19 vaccination program with aims to vaccinate 180 million people by March next year. And they specifically asked us to do so by scaling up the SMILE system. It took us 4 months to adapt the system and prepare it for the national COVID-19 vaccination program across all 10,000 health facilities across the country, just in the time for the national COVID vaccination campaign to get started on 13th January this year. So you may ask now, what is SMILE? SMILE is an applications-based and digitally powered management system for the vaccine supply chain, which provides real-time and end-to-end tracking of vaccine stock inventory across the entire logistics chain. At any given moment in time, SMILE can tell the health authorities and health workers the location of every batch of vaccine, the volume of vaccine stock at all levels in the supply chain, and if the vaccines have been always kept at the correct temperature range during storage and transportation. Now, the SMILE application immediately identifies any temperature breaches and logistical bottlenecks and allows health officials to take immediate corrective actions. Also, the transition from a paper-based to digital management systems has also significantly improved accountability, transparency, and integrity of vaccine distribution process. Now, important is to recognize that SMILE is not just about installing a software. First came that intricate task for mapping the operating procedures for vaccine distribution down to the last detail. Then the development of adaptable and open source software and provision of adequate infrastructure for support. And finally, the big job of building the capacity of thousands of health workers. And we have trained more than 20,000 health workers. And by the way, 60% of them are women in using the SMILE system. So what are the key determinants for SMILE system? First, it is the government leadership and ownership of the system. SMILE is part of the national immunization strategy, and it's one data platform for COVID-19 vaccine deployment. Second is that SMILE is built on existing systems and capacities to ensure sustainability. Third is that SMILE is implemented in such a way that areas of the country without adequate digital connectivity still receive vaccines through alternative arrangements, ensuring that no one is left behind. Fourth, it is our collaboration with UNICEF and WHO at the country level, where we have distinct, mutually supportive roles and responsibilities agreed upon with the government. And last but not least, the effective leveraging of UNDP's capacities and experiences from various country offices and at regional and global levels to address this complex challenge. Now, you may ask, what is the impact of SMILE? We ourselves asked these questions and commissioned an independent review of the SMILE system. So this review of routine immunization found that SMILE system reduced vaccine wastage by almost 90%, 90. Vaccine stockouts were reduced by 55%. And it also brought significant savings in reduced wastage and misallocation of vaccines, and reduced the number of days for stock replenishment in districts from originally 25 days to 3 days. Now, these efficiency gains are, of course, essential in the race to get the Indonesian people vaccinated against COVID-19 as quickly and equitably as possible. Let me conclude by saying that it has been a privilege working with the government of Indonesia on enhancing the integrity and efficiency of the vaccination process. In the spirit of the South-South cooperation, which the Indonesian government is strongly committed to, UNDP is happy to share these experiences from Indonesia, as we believe that digital and innovative solutions are the way forward as we develop more resilient health systems. Let me stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And it's almost difficult to imagine how you can cover Indonesia, as you were saying in the beginning. I mean, a country with so many different parts and islands and all of that, but also, of course, very interesting for us to accompany to see how we can support. And thank you for also stressing the importance of local ownership and how UNDP, together with partners you were mentioning, WHO and UNICEF, have also worked very closely then to integrate this into national strategies. So, I mean, looking at what's next, what are the main challenges you would say, and where do you see that UNDP in cooperation with other partners can be of support in the government's next step?
Well, Ulrika, the smart system is an important element of the overall vaccination system of the government, but it is not the only system. There are also other systems which are supporting communication, registration of beneficiaries, vaccine and registration, and also issuance of electronic certificates, etc. Now, it is important to make sure that all these different parts of the system work together in a coordinated way, and this is what we are working now. I also have to say that you were talking about the issue of equity within the countries. Now, the SMILE system has an overall dashboard, and this dashboard allows us to have a bird's eye view on the distribution of vaccines across the provinces, districts, and even down to the individual health posts. Now, this, of course, gives an excellent opportunity to the decision makers and health managers to see if there are any provinces which are lagging behind in implementing the vaccination system, and allows them to intervene timely and address these issues.
Thank you. And also, I mean, let's see how we can pick up on that, because, I mean, your story really tells us about the possibility also for UNDP to use our global network. And as you were saying, also our really important framework with regard to South-South cooperation, also to share the experiences from Indonesia and from other countries, as we heard today. Some will come back later, but now we are actually moving to another continent. I'm happy to introduce Malay Diop, who's our resident representative to the Republic of Congo. So over to you, Malay.
Thank you very much, Ulrika, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues and partners. I'm very delighted today to be part of this discussion and also share our perspective from the Congo. I have to start first by sort of saying we are operating in the Congo here under very, very difficult sort of context. First of all, the country is under tough economic crisis since 2014. And it has last year, 2019, developed an agreement with the IMF that unfortunately we are not implemented the way it was supposed to be, and ended up sort of locking up most of the donor support. So we are now, meaning that we are now operating in the country with kind of empty treasure. And even during the highest sort of level of the pandemic, Congo was among the only two countries in the Central African economic region not to benefit from the IMF emergency funding. And that was very highly echoed during the Paris meeting by the president of the country itself, saying his country was the very, very few among the entire world not to benefit from the IMF support, seeing the situation extremely tough. I would like to start with that because I think it determines the rest of what we do here. The country is targeting to vaccinate 3.5 million of people. They are part, as you know, of the COVAX platform. But unfortunately, last April, the country decided to ban AstraZeneca, even before the talk about AstraZeneca. So the first batch of vaccine that was supposed to come in the country, AstraZeneca, was sort of stopped. And the country has now two types of vaccine, Sputnik and the Sinopharm that are using. But in addition to that, the target of population that are vaccinating, the 60%, as per the African Union's target of 60%, even those vaccines in the country, there is a lot of reluctance of people going to get vaccinated, even though the government showed sort of interest and really the president came out, took the vaccination himself with all the members of the government. But at the same time, while the process is taking off, people coming out and vaccinating, including the UN staff, the UN also be showing support on that process. There are still the resistance of really procuring additional vaccine. And one area that UN support is being sort of offered, and UNDP leading that process, is to develop a funding mechanism that will bring together the different partners through a basket fund to support the raising of funding to help the government procure. Because as I said at the beginning, the situation, the financial situation of the country is extremely difficult. There is no money at all, if I can say that. Also, and on the waste issue, I think our offer is mainly coming from the corporate UNDP offer, looking at the greening part. On the waste part also, we are working together with UNICEF and WHO and the government to support the management of that waste and how make that waste less harmful to the environment. This is something that UNDP offer is focusing. In addition to that, on the governance, because what we conducted the social impact of the pandemic, the main sort of challenges that we witnessed was the question of inequality and equity. That was mainly for vulnerable people. And in the response, the different initiatives that was targeted was mainly looking at UNDP support, was looking at how we can help government sort of develop the adequate environment really to reduce that vulnerability part. And on the vaccine side, this vulnerability is still there, it's still a real issue. And UNDP, through what we have developed through the Accelerator Lab COVID tracker platform, is trying to identify those groups of individuals and where they're located in the country, where focus should be put to avoid enlarging that vulnerability aspect. And another element that we're also supporting is looking at strengthening the health system. Here in the Congo, UNDP is implementing the Global Fund, is the recipient of the Global Fund. And through that Global Fund, we are supporting the strengthening of the health system by developing a system of health product management, reinforcing the capacity in terms of storage of medical products, and support the capacity building text through tailored training to health officials. Also, we are looking at building capacity for putting in network the different the lab system in the country, and making sure that the lab chain is networked and the cold chain is very maintained through the provision of easy achievable energy supply. So all in all, that's more or less what we are doing here. And again, we are doing it together under the RC with a strong collaboration with WHO that has led the process of the deployment plan, also working closely with UNICEF. But again, one issue that really as the key challenge that we are facing is funding the vaccine program. And that's really something that I think the UN is trying to help the government, working together with the different partners, non-UN, the bilateral and the multilateral, to try to find a mechanism where we can identify a funding mechanism that can be transparent and reliable, and for which the donors and the different partners rely upon to be able to contribute to the funding. Because at the end of the day, it is going to be very, very difficult for government to raise the money and to purchase the level of the number of vaccines needed to cover the 3.5 million people that I just mentioned at the beginning of my statement. Thank you so much. And if there are any specific question, I would be happy to.
Thank you, Malay, so much. And thank you for both beginning and ending with the harsh reality of the many countries that do not have the funding or financing for both, the handling of the vaccine distribution and what it takes, but also then, of course, looking at the socioeconomic long-term effects as we're doing on behalf of UNDP. We would know that this is really also looking at the entire health system and how they have been hit. And this is something that we used to mention, haven't mentioned this much, but perhaps can I ask you, Peter, going back to you, and then I would like to go back to Hao-Liang and Mandeep as well. Listening to Malay and the situation that we find in so many countries with regard to funding. We also had a question and financing, I would say. What kind of mechanism, do we have in place? And you were alluding to this, Malay, of course, COVAX, but what is it that you see from the WHO perspective? And then perhaps Hao-Liang and Mandeep can also ask the same question to you, because it was also raised in the chat by a participant. Over to you, Peter.
Yes, I saw that question from Amir, and I think it's a great one. To make a long story short, I think we've got a sound approach to the global commodities, if you will. And that's Act A. It's the vaccines and the diagnostics and the drugs and the oxygen and even maybe the genomic sequencing. So in terms of the global commodity distribution, sound approach, of course, you can't distribute vaccines that aren't supplied. So the problem here is supply, and that's why I was focused on domestic manufacturing, et cetera. But where I think we might wish to focus our attention more, Ulrika, is exactly where you were hinting in your question, and where Amir's question goes, and where Malay's point goes, which is in the funding to countries, whether that be for the distribution of vaccines, and there's some of that in COVAX, whether that be for preparedness plans, whether that be for primary healthcare, because vaccines don't deliver themselves, whether that be for the country level data systems that we know through SCORE and other things. So just to say, I wish I could say, here's a fantastic example of country level innovative financing in response to Amir's question in the chat. What I would rather say is, I think we're getting a good handle on the global, which is the $18 billion price tag for this year, the $60 billion for this year and next. Hopefully the G7 will burden share that, as Gordon Brown has suggested. I think the IMF, et cetera, plan goes one step further. But where we should collectively really focus now as we move towards the recovery is the question of whether there's enough funding at the country level to distribute vaccines, and then to build on that for an equitable and resilient recovery, very much in line, I think, with Malay's comments. Because at the end of the day, it's the country level funding, and may I say the country level footprint, which is why the partnership among UNDP and WHO and UNICEF is so important, because of that strong country level footprint to support health systems and multi-sectoral systems in countries. Because at the end of the day, pandemic preparedness, equitable recovery, it starts in communities, in countries. And that's where the financing and the support needs to be ultimately. And that's where I think we'll need to put more focus, if I may say. Thank you, Ulrika, for the question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I could add 3 Ps to the 3 Ds you had with regard to prevention, and also, the ability for the world and the international community to understand that we need to build strong, solid health systems in the long run. Hao-Liang and Mandeep, would you also like to come in with regard to what you've heard, but also the question with regard to support to countries and financing mechanism? Let's see if we have Hao-Liang with us still. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Let me very quickly say a few things about our work on financing. I I think the UNDP's work on financing for development has really largely been focused on global policies and also country financing frameworks. At country level, our main focus now is to support more than 70 countries to develop what's called integrated national financing frameworks, INFF. So that we can work with our partners, not only governments but also private sector together to direct all public and financing flows towards national development goals. In that context, obviously, the national development priorities, including vaccination or healthcare system development, will be integral part of this, INFFs. This is one. Secondly, we're working with G20 and G7, but the G20 in particular now, to support debt relief efforts, and the kind of debt burden standstill initiatives has allowed countries to have trillions of dollars of more of fiscal space by delaying debt payments and so forth. So I think we're working very sort of strongly in this area. In terms of innovative financing framework, again, our work has been working with our governments to generate the kind of fiscal space that are needed. Maybe not necessarily specific for finance for vaccine, but it can also be considered. In China, for example, we worked with a new development bank, which is the BRICS Bank, to have recently issued a bond, for $785 million. That are used to support the stimulus packages, for COVID-19 response. And in Indonesia, we have worked with governments, Sophie knows, to have issued $2 billion of green sukuk in 2 installments that are used to financing green recovery infrastructures across the country in 5 different sectors. So there are ways we can do to help our governments generating fiscal space, but maybe we needed to consider a bit more specifically what we can do for vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Hao Liang. And before giving Mandip the word, I had the message that I should call on Lotta Segerström also to comment. Over to you, Lotta.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
You can.
To begin with, I'd like to thank the organizers for putting together this really interesting panel at a very interesting time. So perhaps I could just jump in from a member state and a donor perspective. For Sweden, it's very important to ensure that the devastating effects that this pandemic has had on development already must not be even worsened by this great vaccine inequity that we are currently seeing. Global equitable access to vaccination has been a priority for the Swedish government since very early on, very early stages of the pandemic. And we have said from the start that there must be a robust multilateral response to the pandemic. So it's only natural that we are a very strong supporter of COVAX and the ACT-A. We are, in fact, the largest per capita donor to COVAX through our donation of over $280 million. And we are also planning to donate over 3 million doses through that mechanism. We speak of the following 3 Ds, actually: dollars, doses, and delivery. And that is why today's discussion is very welcome. And a few panelists have already touched upon the questions that I wanted to pose, and that relates to how we make sure that the rollout of vaccination and vaccine programs in countries are designed and implemented in a way that is not ad hoc, but also simultaneously built stronger health systems. And Mr. Diop has already touched upon it. Very interesting to hear from those experiences. I was also wondering on UNDP does a lot of work on governance and building trust in institutions, which is a factor when it comes to vaccination programs. So if any of the other panelists would like to touch upon that, we are very interested in it. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Lotta. I see time is running, but I really would like to invite also the PR from Bhutan, Ms. Doma Cheshing. Please, over to you, and then we'll get back to Mandip. If you're still with us, Ambassador. The Ambassador from Bhutan. No. Okay, so but let's see if we have someone else who would like to come in. But thank you so much, Lotta, from those perspectives from Sweden. Mandeep, over to you, and also let's see if we have some other comments.
Thanks so much, Ulrika. I'll be really brief. I mean, in addition to the innovative integrated budgeting and financial frameworks, there's also a couple of things which are very easy to do. One is to remove user fees in the health system. That is a very innovative way of increasing fiscal space and financing, I think, which could be explored, and increasing access to health services and strengthening the health system more broadly. The other is which I think probably merits a dialogue of its own, is the partnership with international financial facilities or institutions, I should say. I think there's a lot of scope for innovative financing through those partnerships as well. And finally, I think we have worked in Nepal and in a number of other countries providing advice to government on financing, but there's definitely scope to really go deeper on innovative financing, because I think as Malay has explained the challenge very powerfully, fiscal space and resources at the country level to fund something of this scale and the speed that we need on COVID vaccination is really a major challenge. So I think it's an area that needs a lot more examination. But coming back to what Peter was saying, COVAX is really important, because COVAX is able to get approved vaccines for a much lower price for countries as well, so better value for money. So I think that's an important part of the solution on innovative financing for vaccination as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandeep. And I'm looking here to see if we have more questions. I mean, we had someone online also asking on financing and the INFF. So I asked colleagues also to post a link to our finance sector hub, and also to mention that the INFFs that Hao Liang mentioned, they are also developed in close coordination also with the EU. Let's see, Peter or Hao Liang, if you have also any final comments before we close for today. This was to give you a flavor of how we are developing our unique offer in coordination with others, building very much on the experience that we have in member states across the world. But let's see if we have some final comments, if we still have Peter with us, perhaps not, if we have passed by.
No, I'm here.
So you're still here.
Yeah, I'm here. Did you want to go first, Hao Liang, or shall I go?
No, please go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. So firstly, just to appreciate the comments of Lotta from Sweden, at this instant, it's the donation of vaccine doses that go into that mechanism that are going to save lives immediately. So Sweden and the other countries that have shared doses, it's hard to do, but so important to save lives and for equitable distribution, in addition to the financial support. So that's point one. Point two is, I think Lotta and I will have to agree to 4 Ds, because we each had 3. One of them was different. Maybe we could do a deal around 4 Ds, and that would make sense. And then finally, where I'd like to end is we could spend a whole we could spend a whole hour on innovative finance. Every government's going to be cash strapped. There's about $90 trillion in the world economy. The majority's in the private sector. The ability to have impact-oriented private capital, working with the IFIs, focused on the country level, so important, not totally figured out. And so just to put a placeholder down there, but where I'd like to end is also something at every level. One of the remarkable features is there's at least a 50-fold difference in cumulative mortality amongst countries, amongst G20 countries, by the way, in terms of the pandemic, probably higher. That tells you something. Some of it's luck, but some of it must be leadership. And in a sense, where I'd like to end is just to say leadership is the ultimate vaccine in our response to COVID, pandemics, and the conjoint global challenges that we face in climate, in racism, in economic inequality, and so on. And so there's a final common denominator there, whether that's at the head of state level, whether that's deep embedded in a community that we mustn't forget, just because it's one of those soft variables that's hard to measure, leadership being the ultimate vaccine. And I just want to close by thanking UNDP and your administrator for the leadership that you've shown in the multilateral system in addressing vaccine inequity and in working so closely with WHO and other multilateral partners in support of countries to address this worst crisis in 100 years. And it's a pleasure to be with you today, and certainly wonderful to work with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter, and greetings also to all WHO colleagues and all of us working together, I think is what needs to happen. But as you say, at the end of the day, it's at the country level, different levels in countries where we need to see that leadership exercised. And certainly, if we wish to exercise leadership as an international community, there are as many solutions as there are problems. So let's challenge our leaders, but also then be of the best support we can as the UN. Hao Liang, over to you for some final words. It has been interesting. As I said, this is just a quick overview of what's happening within UNDP in coordination with others, and more to come. And perhaps we should have a session on the financing, as many questions have alluded to this. And we heard the reality from Congo. But over to you, Hao Liang, and then we're closing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just couldn't agree with more, with Peter's point on leadership. At the heart of it is really about the strengths and the purpose of governance systems we have at global level, country level, and really subnational level. And as I started to say, we are facing multiple challenges, really multiple significant challenges, and they're so complex and dynamic. And so the quality of leadership, quality of governance, really at the heart of effective response to these multiple challenges. And in this regard, I just want to say that I think we have to learn from our different experiences, and to make sure that we have a multi-stakeholder engagement in this effort. It cannot just be government making decisions and top down. It has to really involve all stakeholders in the process, and so that we have sensible decisions that are taking into considerations of different views and voices, and so that we set priorities right. It's really about prioritization in this time of stress. So I think really importance of leadership and the quality of governance. So over to you, Ulrika.
Thank you, Hao Liang, and very good words to end with. At the heart of UNDP's mandate to support and work with governance, and very much needed. And it was mentioned in the beginning, the trust that we need to create also in societies in times when we see increasing inequality. And Peter, you alluded to this also, the risk of also having conflict dimensions also playing out as communities and countries can't find a way to address this as a whole, or the international community for that matter. Thank you so much to all of you having participated, to the panelists, not least of course to colleagues from Serbia, from Indonesia and from Congo. Really interesting also to have a glimpse of your realities and how our support is supporting you, but not least also to see what's next and how we need to continue to work together. We will get back to you with more dialogue series, and you have also through your questions also giving us some ideas of what you would like to hear and discuss. And don't hesitate to contact us and come up with ideas what you would like to discuss more in depth. And if you have any more detailed questions that you haven't had answered here, you find a lot of information on our website, but we'll also see too that we can also share some information as a follow-up to this seminar. Thank you so much, and looking forward to our next occasion when we meet, but not least to the work that we need to do on an everyday basis together to address this troubled world. But let's remember, there are as many solutions as there are problems, and we can create that Mandela moment of finding those solutions. Thank you, and have a nice day and evening to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.